It's Friday, everyone. What do we do on Fridays here at the Hint Hive? That's right, we smash the patriarchy. Hey there, beautiful humans. Welcome back to the Hint Hive, Amplifying Women's Voices, where we unpack the truths, challenge the systems, and unapologetically claim our power. I'm your host, Kelly Hint, queen bee of this hive, feminist life coach, psychotherapist, and your partner in truth-telling. Today's episode, it's a big one. We're pulling back the curtain on the questionable ethics, and that's putting it mildly, of science and medicine. Specifically, how these institutions have exploited women and marginalized communities for centuries, often under the pretense of advancement or necessity. It's a tough truth to confront, but if we're committed to collective healing, liberation, and justice, then it's a truth we have to stare straight in the face and say, no more. Now, this episode is not about pointing fingers just to stir outrage. It's about understanding the systems that we participate in as patients, as citizens, and as advocates for ourselves and others. When we know the history, we start to reclaim power that was taken. When we unlearn the myths, we begin to write a new story grounded in justice, transparency, and care. So let's begin with a story. One that isn't fiction. One that should be on every bookshelf, in every medical ethics class, and held sacred in every space that calls itself healing. We're going to start with the story as told in the book by Rebecca Skloot, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I had the pleasure of reading this book recently, and it inspired me to throw out my entire podcast topic schedule and stick this in there because I was so moved by the story and the ethics involved in the questions that it brought up in my own mind, in the disturbing fact that I could see both sides of the story, even though one side was less fortunate than the other. So let's talk about Henrietta Lacks. She was a Black woman, a daughter, a mother of 5, and a wife. In 1951, she went to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore for treatment of cervical cancer. During her treatment, her doctors took tissue samples from her cervix without her knowledge or consent. Now, this was not uncommon at the time. In fact, it was standard practice, especially for Black patients who were often treated as research subjects rather than full human beings. Henrietta's cells, it turned out, were unique. They did not die like other cells in the lab. They kept reproducing indefinitely. This made them incredibly valuable to researchers. Those cells became known as HeLa cells, and they changed science forever. Now, if there's anyone out there listening in the medical community, especially those working in various aspects of cancer research or treatment, you know what HeLa cells are. So Henrietta's cells were used in the development of the polio vaccine. They helped researchers to understand cancer, AIDS, and the effects of radiation and toxins. They were crucial to in vitro fertilization and gene mapping. Her cells were sent into space and used in pharmaceutical testing. They became the cornerstone of biological research. And yet, Henrietta never knew. her family wasn't informed. No one asked. It wasn't until the 1970s, over 20 years after her death, that her children learned the truth. And even then, only because scientists wanted more samples from them to continue their own research. Meanwhile, biotech companies and research institutions have made billions of dollars from HeLa cells. And Henrietta's family, for decades, couldn't even afford adequate health care. The irony is painful. The injustice, blinding. And unfortunately, what happened to Henrietta is not an isolated case. It is emblematic of a deeply rooted and ongoing legacy of medical exploitation, disregard, and dehumanization of marginalized bodies, particularly those of women, Black people, and other communities of color. Henrietta Lacks' story, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Her story is one thread in a much larger, insidious pattern that has been woven into the very fabric of Western medicine. When I read this book, again, the book is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. I read this story, and there were at various points I became very tearful, just as her children, like reading about their lives, their horrific, marginalized lives. They couldn't get basic health care, and yet their mother was a pioneer without her knowledge in science, in research. And it was a struggle for me because her family was never compensated in any way, shape, or form. But then also, I understand the importance of research. But again, that's veering off a little bit into a moral dilemma that isn't the point of this episode. The point of this episode is that medicine has a racism and sexism problem, and I really want to shine a light on it. And after reading this book, I want everyone in the world to know the name of Henrietta Lacks. She is the sole reason for some of the advancements in science and medicine that we've had today, and nobody even knew her name. And so I want to amplify that. I want to highlight that and make sure everybody knows the name of Henrietta Lacks, because what happened was damn near miraculous with her cells. So let's zoom out and look at the broader historical landscape. So medicine as an institution has long relied on the exploitation of marginalized communities, particularly women, people of color, indigenous populations, and those living in poverty. From unethical experimentation to systemic neglect and erasure, the foundation of modern medical knowledge has often been laid upon injustice, coercion, and non-consensual practices. So J. Marion Sims, often referred to as the father of modern gynecology, gained his fame by performing repeated surgical procedures on enslaved Black women, such as Anarcha, Lucy, and Betsy, without anesthesia or consent. These women were subjected to agonizing experimentation under the belief that their suffering was acceptable in the name of science. Sims justified his actions with deeply racist and unfounded beliefs that Black women feel less pain, a lie that helped perpetuate systemic medical abuse. That harmful myth, shockingly, still lingers in clinical settings today, contributing to ongoing disparities in pain management, diagnosis, and treatment outcomes for women of color. And then we've got the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Some of you may have heard of this if you've had any kind of multicultural education outside of high school. So the Tuskegee study is another egregious example of medical racism. So from 1932 to 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service, in collaboration with the Tuskegee Institute, conducted a study in which treatment was deliberately withheld from hundreds of Black men diagnosed with syphilis. Even after penicillin became the standard and effective treatment in the 1940s, the men were not informed or treated. The purpose? To observe the natural progression of the disease over time. These men were told that they were receiving special free treatment, when in fact, they were systematically deceived and exploited. Many suffered and died unnecessarily, and their families and communities bore the intergenerational trauma of this violation of trust and dignity. History is important, people. And I'm sorry, but no matter whether you agree or disagree with demonstrations of people in certain communities, please try to understand where their anger comes from. I mean, the more I have learned about this throughout the years, the more disgusted I've become with how we have treated various people. Then we've got forced sterilizations that have plagued marginalized communities for generations, often under the guise of public health or population control. So Native American, Puerto Rican, and Mexican American women were frequently targeted, many of them sterilized without their knowledge or coerced through misinformation, language barriers, or threats. In California alone, between the early 1900s and 1970s, thousands of Latino women were subjected to forced or non-consensual sterilization procedures, often while in labor or recovering from childbirth. These practices were fueled by racist, classist, and ableist ideologies, and they have left a lasting legacy of trauma and mistrust within these communities. And also, Indigenous women were systematically sterilized without consent by Indian health services well into the 1970s, often during routine medical visits or childbirth. These procedures were frequently performed without proper explanation, documentation, or any meaningful opportunity for consent. This wasn't an accident or isolated oversight. It was a deliberate strategy rooted in government-sanctioned eugenics policies aimed at reducing Native populations. The result was widespread trauma, medical mistrust, and intergenerational harm that many Indigenous communities are still grappling with today. So when you're wearing your judgy pants and you start looking down at minority populations and their distrust of white people, take a second. Get out of your own head and out of your own experience and maybe do a little bit of research, because I'm sorry, again, the more and more and more that I learn about this stuff, and at 51 years old, I'm still learning. Shockingly, I'm still learning. My empathy for any marginalized community, for any minority is huge. And today, the disparities remain staggering. Today, Black women are still 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than white women in the United States. A statistic that has remained shockingly consistent despite medical advances. Pain is consistently undertreated in women of color, often due to lingering biases and stereotypes about pain tolerance and exaggeration. I'm telling you, that crap pisses me off so much. And trans and non-binary individuals frequently face discrimination, misgendering, and outright denial of care, creating dangerous barriers to access. Disabled women often have their autonomy overridden, their reproductive choices questioned, and their symptoms dismissed. I have experienced that one myself. And far too many women are still gaslit in clinical settings, told that their pain is just stress, their fatigue is in their head, and their symptoms are normal, while they know in their gut that something is wrong. This is not just about isolated bad apples. This is about a system that still fails to center empathy, equity, and trust. My friends, these stories are not relics of the past. They are still active, living legacies that influence how medical care is provided today. They are embedded in the politics that shape healthcare access, in the unconscious biases that determine whose pain is believed, and in the structural inequalities that still define whose lives are prioritized and whose are dismissed. The echoes of past injustices are still very much present. In the waiting rooms, in the emergency rooms, in the research labs, and in the systemic norms of our current institutions. So what the hell do we do about it? Change does not happen from the top down. It begins with awareness, gets fueled by empathy, and becomes unstoppable through action. Every ripple of transformation starts with one person choosing to care more, to ask more, and to speak up. The medical field may be vast, but our individual choices and collective voices have weight. So if you're wondering where to start, right here is a good place. So here are a few powerful and practical steps that you can take right now. Step number 1, educate yourself. Start with The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. An accessible, heartbreaking, and humanizing account that combines scientific history with the deeply personal story of Henrietta's family. It is a must-read for anyone committed to justice in healthcare. Then, go deeper. Explore the history of Black midwifery and doulas, Indigenous healing practices that predate Western medicine, and the ongoing fight for reproductive justice led by women of color. Listen to powerful, nuanced podcasts like Bodies, Sick, or the Nocturnist Black Voices series, which amplify stories often erased from mainstream narratives. Step number 2, demand accountability in healthcare. At your next appointment, ask your provider how they are trained in racial, gender, and cultural equity. Do they understand implicit bias? Are they up to date on inclusive practices and trauma-informed care? Do they seek truly informed consent? and take time to explain risks, options, and alternatives without pressure? Ladies, if you do not feel heard, do not brush it off. Advocate fiercely. Bring a trusted friend or support person. Request a different provider. Ask for your records. File a formal complaint if necessary. Your voice matters, and you have the right to both ask questions and expect thoughtful, respectful answers. I'm telling you, so my primary medical doctor and my gynecologist are both women of color. I am going to assume, based on visuals, that they are potentially Black women. I don't know if there's any Hispanic descent or anything else, but they are two wonderful humans. And let me tell you, they provide to me the medical care that I have never, ever, ever received before in my life. And I wonder if part of it is because they have the knowledge and the direct experience of failures in the healthcare system, or the knowledge of what happens to people of color in the medical field. And my gynecologist is the most trauma-informed medical provider that I have ever had the pleasure of working with. And I refer people to her all the time. For anyone in the Rochester area, her name is Dr. Amanda Victory. I have mentioned her name before. And if you are a woman with sexual trauma, terrified to go to a gynecologist, I'm telling you, she is the one. She is amazing. Her entire office is fabulous. She is incredibly gentle and informative, and she tells you exactly what she's doing every single second of the visit. It's amazing. And this is what I'm talking about. Find your people. Find the providers. And I know there's a privilege associated with that, because I know not everybody has the means to either travel. Like, I travel 45 minutes for my gynecologist, because I just won't go anymore ever again to somebody who treats me like a slab of meat on a table. But if you do have the opportunity to seek providers that are more aligned with you and that give you the care that you need and deserve, please try to find them. Step number 3. Support organizations that center justice. So groups like Sister Song, Black Mamas Matter Alliance, National Birth Equity Collaborative, and Indigenous Women Rising are leading the charge toward equity, informed care, and community-driven solutions. These organizations are doing vital work, whether that's advocating for policy change, providing maternal health services, or educating communities on their rights. Support them with your time, your money, your platform, or even by simply spreading the word about their work. Follow them, share their content, and show up however you can. Find local communities. Find organizations within your community that support what you're looking for, that support this equity that we're talking about. And then step number 4, engage in hard conversations. Bring this topic into your relationships. Talk to your friends, your partners, your children, your colleagues. Speak about what you've learned, not just the facts, but the emotions, the injustices, and the lingering impact. Make it personal. Ask questions. Be willing to sit in discomfort, especially my white friends. I know racial stuff is uncomfortable for us, but think about what it was like for the people going through it. We can sit in our discomfort, okay? Do not let this history stay buried in academic texts or one-off news cycles. Use your voice to open hearts, to challenge assumptions, and create the kind of ripple that turns into a wave of change. And especially, I'm going to say this, white ladies, come on, it is up to us to use our privilege to break down these barriers for our sisters of color. Let's use our privilege for what it's meant for, and that is to help others. Step number 5, I'm sorry, but vote with fierce intention. I hate bringing politics into anything, but your vote is not just a personal choice. It is a communal act of resistance and care. Support candidates and legislation that prioritize equitable, accessible, and trauma-informed healthcare systems, especially those informed by the lived experiences of BIPOC, LGBTQ+, disabled, and low-income communities. Research their platforms. Hold them accountable. Your ballot is a tool of advocacy, so use it boldly. And then finally, step number 6, amplify the voices of the marginalized. Share and elevate the work of Black women, Indigenous scholars, disabled advocates, trans and queer healthcare workers, and others whose voices have historically been sidelined. Recommend books, repost social media content, highlight speakers and writers on your platforms, and invite their perspectives into your conversations. True transformation happens when those most impacted are not just included, but they are centered, valued, and uplifted. And listeners, if I can ever figure out the tech of doing interviews, obviously I've got a little bit going on in my life right now. Lots of family crises that are still being dealt with, so I have not had the time to do more research into this. But when I can finally figure out how to do podcast interviews remotely and make it sound good, because sound quality is important to me, I want to hear marginalized voices. I want to interview women of color. I want to interview people in the LGBTQ community. I want to interview the voices that have been squashed. This is the time to amplify them. All right, let's move to our quote of the week. Let's anchor ourselves with this quote to hold in our hearts this week. Desmond Tutu said, "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Just take a second. Let that quote sit with you. Neutrality might feel safe, but it doesn't change anything. Awareness, accountability, and radical compassion, that, my friends, is the path forward. That is where healing happens. To all the women listening, your body is not an experiment. Your story is not a case study. Your pain is not up for debate. Your consent is not optional. Your dignity is not negotiable. And your voice has the power to reshape systems. So here's your challenge this week. Share this episode with at least one person who needs to hear it. Journal about how this history intersects with your own experiences in healthcare. and take one brave step to advocate for yourself or for someone who might not feel empowered to speak up yet. Because ladies, when we know better, we do better. And when we join together, we transform. And don't forget to come on over to the Facebook Hint Hive podcast group. Ladies, we are stronger together, and I want to hear your stories. The link to the group is in the episode description. Please come on over and join. And as always, of course, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of this hive. Thank you for being truth seekers and system challengers. Thank you for amplifying what matters. Thank you for exactly who you are. Thank you for your support in listening to me drone on and on each week. Until next time, ladies, stay fierce, stay formed, and stay unapologetically you. This podcast is powered by Kelly Hint Empowerment Coaching, as well as Kelly M. Hint LMHC and The Cranky Counselor. To find out more about coaching services, head over to CoachKellyHint.com. If you'd like to know more about the psychotherapy services I offer to individuals within the state of New York, you can check out KellyMHint.com. And if you'd like to learn more about aromatherapy, you can check out TheCrankyCounselor.com.